For section 2.3, we're going to keep working with quadratics, and this time we're going to be using a calculator. But before we get to that, let's do some work by hand and also think about what we've talked about in the past. The first thing we're asked to talk about is how would you define a maximum or a minimum of a quadratic? So a maximum would be like the highest point. The minimum would be the lowest point. Now, the maximum would have to be for a downward-facing parabola. The minimum would have to be for an upward-facing parabola. So something like that. You can describe it whatever words you want to add to it. That's just kind of like scratching the surface for me. The next it says for the quadratic function f of x equals negative 3x squared plus 12x minus 18, find its maximum. So let's just start by finding its axis of symmetry. So again, A in this case is negative 3, B is 12, and C is negative 18. So to find our axis of symmetry, we use that x equals negative b over 2a. So we got negative, our b value in this case is 12, over 2 times negative 3. Up top, negative 12 is, well, negative 12. 2 times negative 3 gives us negative 6. Negative 12 divided by negative 6 gives us a grand total of 2. So our axis of symmetry is the line x equals 2. For our vertex, because our vertex is either going to be the maximum or minimum, in this case it's going to be the maximum because it opens downward, the x coordinate we already know, it's 2. To find the y coordinate, we're going to plug in that 2. So we'll do f of 2 equals negative 3 times 2 squared plus 12 times 2 minus 18. Negative 3 times 2 squared. 2 squared is 4, so negative 3 times 4 is negative 12, plus 12 times 2, 24, minus 18. So negative 12 plus 24 is positive 12, minus 18 gives us a grand total of negative 6. Let me shift this around a little bit. So, there we go. So, our y coordinate is at negative 6. So that means our maximum value, if you're just talking about the value, is just the y value, so it's going to be negative 6. All right, let's take a look at our goals for the day. So the first thing we're asked to do is find a given value of a quadratic function. So you're given a quadratic, we're going to use our calculator to make sure we know what the output is. We're asked to then find the maximum or minimum of a quadratic and also find the zeros or roots of a quadratic function. Let's start by talking about the zeros of a function. A zero of a function is a value of the input x that makes f of x equals 0. In other words, it's kind of like the x-intercept. Where does it touch the x-intercept? So a quadratic function can have either 2 zeros, kind of like we see on that graph there, or it could have 1, say it was like a parabola that just touched the x-axis, pretend that touched, and bounced off. Or it could have no 0 zeros, like maybe an upward-facing parabola over here, or a downward-facing parabola over here. So it's always going to have 2, 1, or 0 zeros. All right, the rest of this lesson is going to require some fancy camera work, so hopefully I'll make it as easily visible as possible. So for the first function, for example, one, it says for the function f of x equals 0.37x squared plus 2.4x minus 7, find the value of each below. So what I'm going to encourage us to do is, in our graphing calculators, go to y equals. Let me darken the screen so it's a little easier to see. So, hopefully that's easier to see. And let me biggie size this part of the screen. So we're going to type in that function. Let me get it so I can actually see the function. So we're going to type in 0.37x squared plus 2.4x minus 7. So just typing in that function. And then we're going to take a look at the graph. So press graph, and ooh, my window's all messed up. So if your window is all weird like that, if you press the zoom button here, press zoom and then 6, it'll go back to the standard window. Now you can kind of see the graph goes a little bit off the page. So what I'm going to do is press window here. Let me adjust this to see if I can get it a little less blurry. It's odd that actually helped a little bit. But our window is a little bit off, so I'm going to press window, and then I'm going to go down to y min, and I'm going to change that to, let's go negative 20, just so we can see it a little bit better. So if we go y min down to negative 20, you can see the bottom now. Now it asks us to do f of 4. So instead of plugging 4 in, we can just press trace. And then if you just type the number 4 and hit enter, you'll see it gets an output. And the output here is, sorry, it's a little hard for me to read right now. It is 8.52. So let's jot that down. So at f of 4, our output is 8.52. Same thing for -7. So we'll go trace -7. Type that in. And we'll see we get an output of -5.67. Let me jot that down as well. So we got -5.67. Now it asks us to find the minimum, and we've done this in the past, but let's just review again. So to find the minimum, we'll do second trace, and then we'll choose option number 3, hit enter, and then we're going to make sure the left bound is a little bit to the left of it. Well, our minimum is right about there, so our left bound, that's blinking right there, that's good enough. We'll press enter. Then we're going to move our right bound so that it's to the right of that minimum, and hit enter, and put your guess kind of close to it, and hit enter, and there's our coordinate. So our coordinates there are going to be let me move this so I can see, -3.24, comma, our y coordinate of -10.89. So we've used our calculator to find the minimum. Now we're also going to use our calculator to find the zeros. So if you go back to that menu, we haven't used this yet. If you go second trace to get back to that menu, you'll see option number 2 is 0. That's kind of a confusing sentence. So option number 2, let me biggie size this a little bit more. Option number 2, it says 0. So we're going to hit enter there. And then we're going to go left bound. Well, we've got 2 zeros. We've got one over here and one over here. So we're going to move it a little to the left of the, let's do the left one first. So make sure it's to the left of it, hit enter. And then for right bound, make sure it's to the right of it. In this case, right happens to be below the line. And then put your guess kind of close to it, hit enter, and then there's our 0. So one of our zeros is at, let me shrink this and put this, sorry, this camera work is not the best that I've ever done. But our 0 ends up being one of them at x equals -8.66888. So we're going to say -8.67. The other one, off to the side here, or off to the right side here, we're going to use second trace. We're going to do the same thing again. We're going to choose option 2 for zeros. We're going to move our cursor so that's a little to the left of the 0 on the right. And we're going to hit enter there. Then we're going to move a little to the right of it, which happens to be above. Hit enter. Put your guess kind of close to it. Hit enter. And there's our output. So you see the y value is 0. And then our x value is, jotting this down on our screen, we got x equals 2.18. So we have 2 zeros for this graph.